What's going on YouTube? So of course it's a big deal when a new Civic comes out because it is such an incredibly popular sedan. And just shortly ago, we gave you guys a really detailed review of the entire Civic lineup featuring the Touring trim level. But what we wanted to do today was take a detailed look at this Sport trim level, because Honda says this is what the majority of you guys will buy. 40% will choose this Sport trim level because of its combination of value and style. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in and check out this Civic Sport. So this all-new generation of the Civic has, of course, a very different design than the outgoing generation. It definitely has a very mini Accord look to it, and it's a little bit more conservative, but more mature looking. Now, as far as the Sport trim level itself, it's not very different from the other trim levels. So you're still going to have this black finish grille with the bars that run through it here, and then you have the kind of trapezoid-shaped lower fascia down here at the bottom. Now, this being a black colored model, as you can see, it does all blend together to make a really nice, cool, stealthy look. Now, as we come over here to the headlights, this is another nice feature for this all-new Civic because you have standard full LED headlights across all the trim levels, including this lower-end Sport model. That also includes the daytime running lights and the turn signal indicators. Though down here at the bottom, you will notice a blank spot. It looks like a fog light, but it won't be a fog light until you choose the fully loaded Touring trim level. But probably my favorite aspect of this new exterior design for the Sport are these wheels. You have an 18-inch gloss black alloy wheel, which looks really, really nice. This is actually the same size that you get on the fully loaded Touring model, but brought down to this Sport trim level. And then as far as your mirrors to match with those wheels, this will be finished in a gloss black no matter which exterior color you choose. And then the technology inside of the mirrors, you're not really going to have anything going on because it will require at least the EX trim level or higher if you want heating or blind spot monitoring.
So here at the side of the Civic Sport, I do want to mention a few things. This is around an inch larger than the previous generation Civic model, and you can kind of see that here at the side. It has a more mature look. And then we're also going to notice that we have blacked out window surrounds for the Sport model. And then coming around to the rear design itself, we're going to have that signature Civic look. With this all new model, it does look more mature, has a more classy and elegant look, but the Sport does throw in some really nice touches that make it look a little bit more sporty. For one, we have Sport branding right here. We're also going to have these same LED taillights. They're LED accented and the brake light portion is LED. However, the other two components are incandescent. Then if we drop down here, this is where you're going to notice a big difference for the Sport. That's because this is the only trim level of the Civic sedan that you're going to get the exposed exhaust outlet. Now, one really nice thing about the Civic Sport is that even though this is a lower trim level of the Civic lineup, this is still going to have all of your safety systems. So it's going to be forward emergency braking with pedestrian detection, lane keeping assist, auto high beams, and adaptive cruise control. Now, you will be missing out on the traffic jam assist on the Touring model, but really I'm very pleased that they throw in all of them on the Civic. Well, anyway, that's wrapping up the exterior design of this new Civic Sport. I'm a huge fan of the way this looks on the outside, but now let's go ahead and see what they put on the inside before we take it out in a spin. And before we do all of that, it would really make my day if you hit that subscribe button down below. It's going to give you access to tons more car content, so please go ahead and do that.
So first, walking up to this Civic Sport, it does come with the smart entry system with the new Honda key fob and remote start on this trim level. And of course, getting inside is as simple as reaching behind the handle. Alright, so let's take a look inside of this cabin. As you can see, of course, you've got that brand new and very premium looking interior for this new generation of the Civic. And if you watched our touring video, you'll notice that most of the interior actually looks the same as that top-end model. Now let's talk about the different interior color material options, which is going to be very short for the Sport model. All the Sport models will come with this mainly cloth seat, but it does have a leatherette trim on the outside edges, and black is going to be the only color option for the Sport, even though the other trim levels can get the additional option of gray. Now turning over here to your door trim, you're going to find the same cloth across the armrest with a stitching detail as well as above it. You do have a black trim through here, and the top part of the door trim is actually going to be hard touch on this trim level, even though it's soft on the Touring. As far as your windows, they're going to be one touch auto up and down for the driver and the passenger. And the Sport model does throw in the nice looking aluminum pedals. Now coming over here to your seat, since this is the second to base trim level, as you would expect, it does have a manual adjusting seat. This is going to be 6-way manual adjusting. And then, like I already mentioned, we have a mostly cloth seat on board with the Sport trim level. I do like the design of this with this nice gray insert as well as the color contrast stitching, and it is very comfortable. Interestingly enough, I noticed that is a different chime than what you have in the Touring. But taking a look around this cabin, like I already mentioned, this is mostly the same as the Touring trim level, which is certainly very nice. So we have very high quality materials, including a soft touch upper dashboard. As we move to the middle area, we have a big piano black piece here with this really cool vent design that I absolutely love. Definitely has a clean and classy appearance to it. Got some more soft touch material down there. As we move down through here, this is going to be hard touch. We have this large piece of faux carbon fiber that runs through here, and everything does fit together extremely well. Now to start it up, put your foot on the brake and press the illuminated button. Now once you start up the vehicle, what you will notice is an interesting gauge cluster arrangement. This is actually half digital and half analog. So if you look closely, you can see that this is a 7-inch display right through here. This is what comes on the majority of Civics except for the full digital display on just the Touring trim level. And for this is highly customizable as well. So you can scroll through all these different kinds of information, and you can click into them using the steering wheel mounted control. And as you can see, it does kind of change the design and stuff. Although not quite as customizable as the full digital, of course. Now, moving back here to the steering wheel, we do have a very nice leather-wrapped steering wheel with the brand new Honda design. Nice looking piano black accents, as well as a double color contrast stitching detail. And the Sport trim level does also throw in the paddle shifters on the back of the steering wheel. As far as the wheel itself, it is going to be manual, tilt, and telescoping. But let's go ahead and dig into interior storage, because this is a place where the Civic has always excelled above the competition. So we'll start out underneath our center console, which is finished in cloth for the Sport trim. This, of course, is very generously sized. This is actually just about as big as the Accord. And when we get our thick stack of coupons out, it'll slide in here without even having to fold them in half, which this is a test, by the way, that the Corolla does fail. So very impressive. In front of that, we've got our 2 cup holders, and then the very front we have a large storage bin up here with a rubber lining. It is wirelessly charging on just the Touring trim level, however. Now coming back here to the shifter, we just have a traditional one. Pull back for drive. You can shift through manual simulated gear changes with those paddles that I just showed you. And then when we head into reverse, we do have a standard backup camera with active trajectory, and you also have a couple different views that you can switch between right through there. Parking sensors are on just the Touring trim level. However, even the Sport trim does come with an electronic parking brake hold function. You also have your drive modes and your button to turn on and off your auto start stop system. Now moving up the dashboard to our next area, we have our climate controls. So here with the Sport as well as the LX, those are going to have a single zone automatic climate control setup. So you can adjust your temperature right here with this really nice and high quality feeling knob. You got your fan speeds and your zones right over there. You will notice we don't have heated seats on this example. It will require at least the EX trim level to get heated seats. And now let's go ahead and take a sample of the audio system. So the Sport's going to include the middle tier sound system, which has 8 different speakers. So we'll go ahead and take a sample of that. I'm actually quite impressed by this sound system. It really has a nice and full sound and a decent amount of bass, even though this is not the fully loaded Bose sound system that you get in the Touring trim level. Okay, and let's take a look here at this display. So this is a 7-inch display. This is what's included on all of the trim levels except for the Touring model with a 9-inch display. And what's different about this is essentially you have thicker bezels on the outside edges there. You've got your volume and your tune knobs right over there, and you also have some physical hard buttons down here at the bottom to navigate through the system. The important thing that you're probably worried about is this right here. This is where you will have Android Auto and Apple CarPlay abilities, the wired variety for the 7-inch display, and that's standard on all of the models. Now jumping on up here, we do have a manual dimming mirror. And then the Sport trim does not include a moonroof. That's going to require one more tier up to the EX trim level if you want that.
So welcome back to the Civic sedan's rear seat. As far as the space is concerned, I'll talk about that first. We're going to be looking at 37 inches of both leg and headroom, which is a very respectable figure. That's larger than the vast majority of the segment, although it is exactly the same as the previous generation model, so you're not going to have any space increases. But like I said, it's very spacious. Behind Drew's seating position, I have, I would say, probably 6 inches of rear leg room. My feet can slide up underneath the seat. Perfectly happy back here for sure. Now, as far as the features are concerned, though, that's where you're going to be lacking for this Sport model. We don't have any vents, we also don't have any USB ports, and we're also going to be missing out on the central armrest. If you want some of that equipment, you're going to have to go up to the higher end models, because I do know that it will throw it in, but you're just not going to have it here on the Sport. Now, walking up to the tailgate, just locate the button to open it up. And as far as the space is back here, so we have 14.8 cubic feet of space for this Sport model. It's 14.4 if you go for the Touring, so you actually are going to get a little bit more space for going for one of this base trim levels of the Civic. And as far as how they've done it back here, we have a single folding seat. I do want to point that out. It's 60-40 split folding on the upper end trim levels. It's single folding here on the Sport. And then if we lift up the floor here, there is a spare tire. And we are also going to be missing out on the grab handle here to close the trunk. Not a really big deal, but you will miss out on that. The passenger seat is going to be manually adjusting. It's power on the Touring. And then if we open up the glove box, this is going to be a really good sized glove box. I mean, it's not massive, but it's perfectly fine for what I would expect out of this segment. And the most important job is to fit in our coupons, and it does that A-okay. Now up top, we have a sun visor. We can open it up. We have a mirror. We are missing out on the light, and we can also detach and extend.
And there is 60 with this all-new Civic Sport. So with the Sport trim, the big difference between the Touring trim level that we reviewed a short time ago is the fact you have a different engine on board. So just like with the outgoing Civic, there's 2 different engine options that you can pick between. The LX and the Sport are going to have a 2-liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder engine. We have 158 horsepower and 138 pound-feet of torque with this motor. Which power is, it's fine. This is pretty good power for this category of vehicle, but of course it is going to be less than the 180 that you get with the 1.5 liter turbo in the other 2 trim levels. Yeah, so I mean, nothing in this category is gonna like really wow you, but this is definitely more than adequate getting around town. And one of the things that I do notice with this is the tuning with the engine, throttle response, and the continuously variable transmission that this comes with. Between those three, it is definitely tuned to be nice and responsive as soon as you get off the line. So it feels more powerful than it is for that initial launch off. And since I did mention the transmission, I will go ahead and say that you cannot get a manual transmission on the sedan anymore, but if you want that in the future, you can get the hatchback model. And there is our auto start stop system. I think Honda's done a pretty good job with this. It is nice and smooth. You do have a physical button here to turn it off if it's something that you don't want, but both of the engines now have auto start stop.
Yeah. And while we're cruising here, going around 55 miles an hour, I do want to mention the ride quality as well as the noise level. The ride quality of the Civic Sport is still very nice. I'm impressed with how the Civic rides. It soaks up the bumps well, even though this is the sportier version of the Civic. And I do want to mention, though, that this is a little bit louder than the Touring model. Honda has actually put some specific sound deadening in the Civic Touring to make it a little quieter than the Sport model, and I can definitely tell that difference, as it was only a few days ago that we were driving around the Civic Touring pretty extensively. So do keep that in mind. However,
it's more sound deadening than the outgoing generation, regardless, but the Touring does add even more sound deadening.
And we'll get a reading to compare when we get up to speed again on this stretch.
So before we get that sound reading, let's talk about one of the things that has not changed with this new generation, and that is how fun this Civic is to drive. This is a vehicle that is always set right at the top of the class, and that continues for this new generation, especially with the Sport trim. They've just done an excellent job. I mean, it's just so tight and so well balanced. You have very little body roll at all. We drove some really twisty country roads in the Touring trim level in Michigan, and you know, from that extensive seat time, I can just confirm to you that this is a joy to drive. It really is, and that's not something that you say about many of the competitors at all that tend to be very appliance-like. This actually puts a smile on your face, and you can hustle this through some country roads.
Yeah. And this is, of course, going to be front-wheel drive only, and as far as the fuel economy is concerned, the Sport trim is going to be coming in at 30, 37, 33 miles a gallon combined. That is going to be a little bit less than what you're going to get with the more powerful turbo engine that does actually net you better fuel economy than this 2-liter, but overall they're about the same, so mainly the only thing you're sacrificing is going to be the power. And let's get that sound level reading. It is reading 64.2. I don't know, that seems a little bit high.
Yeah, it's windy outside.
Yeah.
But yeah, like we commented, it definitely does sound a bit louder than what you get in the Touring trim level, because you are sacrificing a little bit of sound deadening, and it's going to be, you know, a little bit quieter than the outgoing generation, but maybe not.
I would say this is still a little bit louder than some main competition like the Mazda 3 and Hyundai Elantra, though.
Okay, so let's do today's Slam Dunk and Airball. We have a lot of different choices for the Slam Dunk, but I think with the Sport model, the big thing is value. So this, of course, is giving you a lot of what you have in the high-end versions inside of this, especially when it comes to the cabin and the styling as well.
Yeah, for sure. For the Airball, it's going to be a pretty simple thing, but would like to see blind spot monitoring. This has all of the other safety systems as standard, which I applaud Honda for, but blind spot monitoring is a big deal for me, and I think it should be a big deal for the average consumer, and it's just not available on the Sport, which they sell 40% of, so that's kind of a little bit of an oversight.
But all in all, with this Civic Sport, I'm very impressed. I think there's a good reason why most people choose the sport trim level of the Civic, because this really just gives you a phenomenal value package. You've got just such nice styling, that sport look, the extra little touches that just make this feel, you know, nice and special, but it is packaged inside of a really affordable price tag. And, you know, this new generation of the Civic really just stands out from the competition in a lot of ways, and this sport trim level, it gives you that great value with that.
Well guys, that's all for this in-depth review of the all-new 2022 Honda Civic Sport. If you enjoyed watching this video or found it helpful, be sure to help us out by hitting that subscribe button down below. It's completely free to you, and there's a whole world of automotive content that we will provide you. Tons of content on this Honda Civic, as well as other vehicles, luxury cars, whatever you want, we've got it on our channel, so be sure to subscribe. It's completely free. Anyway, we'll catch you next time as we sample more of the latest automotive delicacies.